Next, the recent revelations about the alleged sexual misconduct of Mohammed Al-Fayed have raised further questions about the way that rich and influential people use the threat of extensive and expensive legal action to shut down investigations into their behaviour. The subject of so-called strategic lawsuits against public participation, also known as SLAPPs, is being debated by MPs. A number of recent campaigns have been highlighted, including the work of Byline Times journalist Tom Latchum, who's been working on a case exposing potential alleged abuse in care homes.
It will surely be understandable to the House that he feels he cannot afford to face down someone with such resources. And just as it is obvious who loses out if accountability and transparency regarding the treatment of children in care homes is thwarted, it is clear that we need a concrete action plan to stop abusive lawsuits silencing those who speak out in the public interest. And we will only have a hope of stamping out SLAPPs with a comprehensive, robust anti-SLAPP bill.
I'm joined now by the journalist being mentioned there in Parliament, Tom Latchum. Tom, good to see you. Now, look, of course, in Parliament, MPs are covered by privilege. They can pretty much say what they like without the threat of legal action as a result. So we can't go into too much detail about your investigation. What I'm keen to hear about is what it's like when one of these things lands on your doorstep and threatens legal action as a result.
It's not a great feeling, to be perfectly honest. And you mentioned I work for Byline Times. I'm actually freelance, so in a way, it leaves you even more exposed when you're threatened in that way, because you think, and there is the potential here to lose your home. You're a family man, etc., etc. And in this regard, I hadn't even published anything. I'd merely sent a couple of messages to some staff members on the care home after an Ofsted report was pretty damning about it, just saying, would you talk to me? As simple as that. And then this threat came through to basically say, if you publish anything defamatory, we will sue. We will advise our client to sue you as a journalist personally, and my colleague Dan Evans as a journalist, but also any publication in which you do it. I mean, we all know media law. We don't need to be told about that. But that was clearly, it seemed to me, to be a tactic to frighten me away from looking at that topic. Now, they're not just used on journalists, they're used on whistleblowers as well. And I've seen some evidence that has also been the case in this story too. But they're not as robust, perhaps, I wouldn't say often. They're poorly paid a lot of the time. They are taking a brave decision that could risk their career. As journalists, we're sort of used to that. But the entire SLAPP debate yesterday in Parliament was not just about journalists. It was about protecting whistleblowers as well, and they might be scared off from speaking out on public interest matters, which clearly a children's care home is exceptionally high in that regard.
Yes, I mean, look, Tom, I know you've been an investigative journalist for a long time, and many who have will be familiar with the rich and powerful using whatever legal means they can afford, and they can usually afford whatever they like, frankly. So what is different about SLAPPs in particular?
I've got to say that actually that is what's quite interesting about SLAPPs now. We are, the UK is the home of them. I think 30-something% of all SLAPPs originate in the UK, that which is, I think, more than the EU and the USA put together, is what they said yesterday in the debate. And it's actually now not the reserve of the rich. We were investigating a journalist and broadcaster last year, not on a huge amount of money, and we got some huge number of SLAPPs, really quite heavy SLAPPs throughout it. How much do they cost? 2, 3 grand, 4 grand? I had one last year from an MP. They are not now the preserve of the rich and famous, but they are aggressive. They're called lawfare. That's the short term for them. They're aggressive. They don't specify what necessarily the things that you maybe have got wrong. They just say, if you publish this, we're going to sue you for undefined and undetermined costs and damages, etc., etc. I even had a letter recently threatening me with potential contempt of court. These are, you haven't even got to publish a publication. You can't test it in court, and that's what they want. This entire thing is meant to do, to allow people to move forward to publish. That's not to say that we should be able to publish anything if it's wrong or not. It's absolutely the right of anybody to defend themselves in a country of democracy through a lawyer. We're not suggesting that, but it's the manner in which it's done. They're used deliberately to scare people off, rather than engage in a conversation that is legally robust and says, you're wrong there, and actually this is why you're wrong.
Do you think, I mean, you mentioned it being called lawfare there, do you think it's being done because the assumption is the person on the receiving end is not necessarily familiar with the law as it stands, and that will scare them off?
Absolutely. Certainly when it comes to whistleblowers. Whistleblowers are just normal people. They're people who find themselves in a position where they've seen wrongdoing that's in the public interest. They want to speak out. They're protected, in fact, by the law in doing so if it is a public interest matter. But they still sometimes receive these letters. They don't have the ability to refer to lawyers, the media lawyers, like we do. I mean, in fact, through this case, I've been advising some of the whistleblowers. Actually, look, you're probably safe here. Don't worry. There isn't even trumps NDAs, which people say, well, you're NDA'd, you can't speak. No, whistleblowing would trump that, usually, although there's no law in place for that. So, yeah, absolutely, it does. And these people do decide, you know what, it isn't worth my while to speak out about this. And that is dangerous in a functioning democracy.
When you said Trump's NDAs, I thought you were going down an entirely different path. You mean NDAs are superseded by this? You're not talking about a certain person with the same name?
No.
Just to be absolutely clear, Tom, just to be clear. Listen, just to finish off, we heard, I think it was Afsana Begum MP in the Commons yesterday talking about this. There seems to be quite a bit of cross-party support to look at these things. What about government interest in perhaps changing the law as a result?
There was a bill that was going through. Wayne David MP was leading that through the last Parliament, but then the general election happened and that, of course, then stopped. But given that there has been that interest and it got quite far down the road, I think there's a desire from all parties. I mean, you saw yesterday in the debate, there were politicians of all creeds and colours coming together to say, you know, this isn't right. And hopefully we can pick up on what was done in the last Parliament and drive that forward and make that happen in this Parliament. I do think that there is desire from across the board, not only because it's an important matter for journalism, for free speech, etc., but also because it pleases the media organisations, of which, of course, politicians are keen to please, aren't they?
Well, not always, but sometimes. Yeah, Tom, thank you very much indeed. It's good to see you.
You too.
It was quite alike.
Next, detectives are appealing for fresh